The city was already awake long before the sun fully climbed above the buildings. Cars filled the streets in steady lines, engines humming, horns sounding in short, impatient bursts. People moved fast, as if the ground beneath them might disappear if they slowed down. It was the kind of morning where everyone had somewhere to be and no one wanted to be late. At the edge of a wide road, an old woman stood still. She was small, thinner than she probably once had been, and her back bent slightly forward as if the weight of years rested on her shoulders. One hand gripped a wooden walking stick, worn smooth from use. The other clutched a cloth bag, close to her side. Her hair, once dark, was now pale and soft, tied back neatly, as if she still cared deeply about appearing put together, even when her body no longer cooperated. She stood at the crosswalk, staring at the traffic. The white lines painted on the road seemed too wide. The cars moved too fast. The light changed from red to green and back again, and each time it did, her chest tightened. She took a small step forward once, then stopped, pulling back as a bus roared past just inches away. The wind from it made her coat flutter. She tightened her grip on the stick. People passed her on both sides. Some glanced briefly at her and then looked away. Some didn't look at all. Shoes tapped against the pavement, bags swung over shoulders, phones glowed in hands. A man in a dark jacket brushed past her arm without stopping. A woman with headphones stepped around her as if she were part of the street itself, something to be avoided rather than acknowledged. The old woman swallowed hard and looked. Down at the ground, she told herself to wait. She told herself she had crossed roads like this before, but her legs didn't feel as strong today. Her balance wasn't what it used to be, and the noise, the speed, the feeling that the world was rushing past her, it all made her feel smaller than she already was. The light changed again. A group of people surged forward, crossing quickly before the cars could start moving again. They flowed around her, splitting on either side, leaving her exactly where she had been. Someone's elbow brushed her sleeve. Someone else muttered something under their breath about being late. She stayed still. Her heart beat faster than it. She could feel it in her ears, in her throat. She looked up, scanning the faces passing by, searching for something she couldn't quite name. Not help exactly. More like reassurance. A sign that she wasn't invisible, but the faces were blank. Focused elsewhere as the last of the group reached the other side, the light turned red again. Cars surged forward, reclaiming the road. The old woman let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on the stick. She had lived in this city most of her life. She remembered when streets were quieter, when drivers slowed down for pedestrians, when neighbors recognized one another. She remembered a time when asking for help didn't feel like admitting defeat. But those memories felt far away now, like scenes from another life. She shifted her weight, trying to ease the ache in her legs. Across the street, she could see the place she needed to go. It wasn't far, just a few steps, really. But those few steps might as well have been miles. The distance felt larger each time she failed to cross. Another crowd gathered beside her as the light prepared to change again. This time, a young man in a suit stood so close that she could smell his cologne. He checked his watch, sighed loudly, and tapped his foot against the ground. When the light turned green, he rushed forward without a glance in her direction. Others followed. The old woman lifted her foot, hesitated, then set it back down. The cars on the far side already seemed impatient, engines revving, ready to push forward the second the light allowed them to. She imagined herself halfway across, legs failing, the stick slipping, horns blaring. The image made her chest tighten again. She stayed where she was, as the crowd thinned in the road, filled once more with moving metal and noise. She felt a familiar wave wash over her. Embarrassment, frustration, a quiet sadness she tried not to let show on her face. She didn't want pity. She just wanted a little time. A little help. She looked down at her shoes, scuffed but clean, and adjusted her coat again, a habit that calmed her slightly. She reminded herself that she was not weak, that needing help didn't erase a lifetime of strength. Still, the feeling lingered. Time passed in small, heavy moments. The sun climbed higher. Shadows shifted. The noise never stopped. Then, among the steady flow of people, there was a pause. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply a break in the rhythm of the street. A teenage boy had slowed steps. He wasn't dressed like most of the people around him. His clothes were simple, worn but clean. A light shirt, slightly loose at the sleeves. Dark pants creased from use. His shoes showed signs of long walks. He carried no bag, no phone in his hands. His attention wasn't fixed on a screen or the road ahead. It was on her. He noticed the way she stood too close to the edge of the road and yet never stepped onto it. He noticed the tight grip on the stick, the way her shoulders tensed every time a car sped past. He noticed how the crowd moved around her, leaving her behind again and again. He slowed, then stopped completely. For a moment, just watched. The world kept moving around him. People brushed past his shoulder. A car horn blared somewhere behind him. But he stayed where he was, eyes on the old woman. Something thoughtful crossing his face. He remembered his own grandmother. Not her face exactly, but the feeling of her hand in his when they crossed streets together when he was younger. The way she trusted him to keep her safe, even though he had been the child. The memory rose without effort, warm and heavy in his chest. He took a step closer. The old woman noticed the movement and looked up quickly, startled. For a second, fear flickered across her face. She had learned to be cautious. But then she saw his expression, not hurried, not annoyed, just calmed. The fear softened into confusion. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. But it was clear, respectful, like he truly wanted to know the answer. She hesitated. People didn't usually ask her that anymore. Not strangers. Not here. She looked past him, as if expecting him to move on like everyone else. When he didn't, she met his eyes again. "I need to cross," she said quietly. "But my legs aren't very fast." He nodded once, as if that explained everything. "Would you like help?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Pride rose up, stubborn and familiar. She had lived long enough to know how easily people judged, how quickly help could turn into impatience. But something about the way he stood there steady, unhurried, made her feel safe enough to consider it. "Yes," she said at last. "If you don't mind." "I don't mind," he replied. He moved to her side, not too close, leaving her space. He didn't grab her arm or her stick. He waited, letting her decide how to proceed. When the light changed again, he glanced at the traffic, then back at her. "We can take it slow," he said. "They can wait." The words were simple, but they carried weight. As the crowd surged forward once more, the two of them stepped into the crosswalk together. The moment they stepped onto the road together, the noise of the city felt louder. Cars moved on both sides, engines rumbling, tires brushing against the asphalt. The old woman tightened her grip on the walking stick, her steps short and careful. The teenage boy stayed beside her, matching her pace without rushing her. Some drivers slowed down, others did not. A car horn sounded sharply from behind them. The sound made the old woman flinch. Her hand shook slightly, and she paused mid-step. The boy noticed immediately. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're almost there," she nodded, taking a slow breath. She placed the stick down again and continued. Each step felt heavy, but she kept going. People on the sidewalk began to notice. A few stopped walking. A few turned their heads. Most had already crossed and were now watching from the other side. Their faces showed curiosity more than concern, as if they were witnessing something unusual instead of something simple. The boy positioned himself slightly between the woman and the traffic. He didn't think about it. His body just moved that way naturally, as if instinct guided him. If a car edged too close, he lifted his free hand slightly, quiet signal asking for patience. Not everyone listened. Another horn blared longer this time. A driver shouted something through an open window, frustration clear in their voice. The boy didn't respond. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the woman beside him. The light began to blink, warning that it would change soon. The woman noticed, and panic flickered across her face. "It's changing," she whispered. "We'll make it," he said. "Just keep walking with me. You're past the halfway point now." Her breathing grew heavier. She leaned a little more on the stick, and he adjusted his pace again, slowing just enough to keep her steady. He offered his arm, and after a moment, she accepted it. Her hand rested lightly on his sleeve, not gripping, just enough to feel grounded. She hadn't held on to someone like this in a long time, when they reached the final stretch. The light turned yellow. Cars on the far side prepared to move. Engines revved. The noise pressed in on them from every direction. For a brief second, the boy felt fear. Not for himself, but for her. He imagined her losing balance, imagined falling, imagined the chaos that could follow. His heart pounded, but he didn't let it show. He stayed calm, steady, present. They reached the curb, just as the light turned red. The woman stepped onto the sidewalk and stopped. Her knees trembled. She leaned heavily on the stick and then slowly let out a breath, long and shaky, as if she had been holding it the entire way across. She turned to him, eyes glassy. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't think I was going to make it." "You did," he replied. "You just needed someone to walk with you," she smiled faintly. Around them, the world continued. People resumed their pace. Cars surged forward again. But something had shifted. A few people who had watched quietly now looked uncomfortable, as if they were suddenly aware of their own choices moments earlier. Someone nearby lifted a phone at first. It was just one person. They hadn't planned to record. They simply felt something about the moment was worth remembering. The way the boy stood there, listening as the woman spoke. The way she rested for a second before moving on. It felt real, human. The woman adjusted her coat and straightened her posture. "I don't like to bother people," she said. "Everyone seems so busy these days." "You're not a bother," the boy said quickly. "You deserve to get where you're going safely." She studied his face for a moment, as if trying to memorize it. "Your parents raised you well," she said. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "I just did what anyone should do." She shook her head slowly. "Not everyone does." There was silence between them, comfortable and quiet despite the noise around them. She took a step forward, then stopped again. "Where are you headed?" She asked. "Home," he said. "It can wait." She smiled again, wider this time. "Everything feels like it's always rushing. It's nice when someone remembers how to stop." The boy nodded. Though he wasn't sure what to say, after a moment, she thanked him once more and began walking down the sidewalk. Moving slowly but with more confidence than before, he watched her go, making sure she was steady before turning away. As he walked in the opposite direction, he felt something warm settle in his chest. He hadn't done it for praise. He hadn't even thought about it. But the feeling stayed with him, behind him. The phone camera lowered. The person who recorded glanced at the screen, watching the short clip replay. The contrast was clear. A crowded street, dozens of people passing by. One person stopping. They didn't know it yet. But that small moment was already leaving the street. The video did not explode all at once. It moved quietly at first, like a whisper, traveling from one person to another. The person who recorded it watched it again on their phone, then once more noticing small details they had missed the first time. The way the boy slowed his steps without being asked. The way the old woman hesitated, then trusted him. The way the crowd flowed around them like water around a stone. It felt real. Later that evening, the clip was shared with a short line written beneath it. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple sentence about kindness on a busy street. No names, no explanations. Just the moment. Within hours, people began to respond. At first it was a handful of comments. Some people wrote about how the scene reminded them of someone they loved. Others admitted they had been in similar situations and had walked past, convincing themselves someone else would help. A few simply wrote that watching it made them pause and breathe. The boy had no idea. He went home, ate dinner, and did his homework at the small table near the window. The sounds of the city drifted in as usual. Cars, voices, life moving forward. Nothing about his evening felt different. He didn't check his phone much. He didn't feel like anything important had happened to him. It was just a moment. The old woman, meanwhile, moved through the rest of her day with a lighter step. She stopped by the small shop she had been trying to reach, greeted by a familiar face behind the counter. When she finally returned home, she sat down slowly. Feeling the ache in her legs, but also a quiet sense of relief, she thought about the boy. She wondered where he had gone afterward. She hoped he got home safely. She smiled to herself, shaking her head at how such a simple act could linger in her thoughts. That night, she slept better than she had in days. The next morning, the clip had grown. It had been shared again and again, moving across screens and into homes far from the street where it had happened. People watched it while drinking coffee, while waiting for buses, while lying in bed before sleep. Each viewer brought their own story to it, their own memories, their own guilt or gratitude. Some people praised the boy openly. Others focused on the crowd, questioning how a city could move so fast past someone who clearly needed help. The comments were filled with emotion, regret, hope, reflection. Still, the boy did not know. He woke up, got ready, and headed out the door like any other day. The same streets, the same noise, the same flow of people. As he walked, he noticed the old woman's corner again. She wasn't there this time. The crosswalk was empty. He didn't think much of it and kept going. At school, things were normal. Lessons, conversations, laughter, small complaints about homework and tests. No one mentioned the video. No one pointed at him or whispered. He blended in, as he always had. During lunch, he sat with friends, listening more than speaking. He had always been that way. Observant, quiet, comfortable letting others take the spotlight. He felt no urge to talk about what he had done. It didn't feel like a story worth telling. Across the city, though, people were talking. Local pages shared the clip. Community groups reposted it with captions about kindness and responsibility. Some viewers slowed the video down, pointing out the moment the boy stepped slightly in front of the woman. The way he raised his hand toward traffic, it became a mirror. People saw themselves in it, whether they wanted to or not, by the second day. The clip reached places far beyond the city. Strangers commented from places the boy had never heard of. The message was the same, repeated in different words. One person stopped. That mattered. Still, the boy remained unaware. It wasn't until someone recognized the street that things began to change. A person who lived nearby shared the clip with a message, asking if anyone knew who the boy was. Not out of curiosity alone, but out of a desire to say thank you. Others joined in, tagging local pages, sharing memories of that crosswalk and how difficult it was even for younger people to cross. The old woman's face remained mostly hidden in the video, but her posture was familiar to those who knew her. A neighbor recognized the way she walked, the coat she always wore. They smiled sadly, realizing how close they lived and how easily they could have helped. Guilt mixed with admiration, the old woman learned about the video from someone else. A neighbor knocked on her door one afternoon, phone in hand, eyes wide with emotion. Without much explanation, they showed her the clip. She watched quietly, hands folded in her lap. She saw herself standing there, small against the road. She saw the boy step in. Tears filled her eyes before she realized they were there. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't angry. She felt something else. Gratitude, yes. But also surprise at how something so ordinary could mean so much to so many people. "That's him," she said softly. "That's the boy who helped me." Her neighbor nodded. "People are sharing it everywhere." The woman shook her head slowly. "He didn't do it for this." "No," the neighbor agreed. "That's why it matters." The woman thought for a long time after they left. She thought about how easily the world overlooked moments like that. How quickly they passed unnoticed, unless someone stopped to look. She wished she knew how to thank him properly. Meanwhile, the boy finally noticed something was different. It started with whispers. A glance held a second too long. Someone nudging someone else and looking his way. He felt it before he understood it. a change in the air around him. During the afternoon, a classmate leaned over and asked, "Is that you?" The boy frowned. "Is what, me?" They showed him the video. He watched it once, confused. Then again, slower this time. He saw himself on the screen, younger somehow, smaller, standing beside the old woman. He heard his own voice, calm and steady. His stomach dropped. That's just something that happened," he said. "It's everywhere," the classmate replied. "People love it." The boy didn't know what to say. He felt exposed. Not proud, not ashamed, just surprised. He hadn't expected the moment to leave the street. He hadn't expected anyone to care. That evening, he walked home differently. He noticed how many people stood at corners, waited at lights, struggled with bags or balance. He noticed how easy it was to keep walking, how natural it felt to stop. He realized how thin the line was between the two. The city hadn't changed, but he had. The attention did not slow down. If anything, it grew heavier, pressing in from all sides. The boy tried to ignore it at first. He told himself it would pass, that people would move on to the next thing, as they always did. But each day the video reached more people, and with it came more reactions. Some were kind. Some were loud. Some felt uncomfortable. He began to understand something he had never thought about before. Doing something good quietly was one thing. Having the world watch you do it was something else entirely. He still took the same streets, still waited at the same lights. But now, when he stopped at corners, he felt eyes on him. Sometimes people smiled. Sometimes they stared. A few even approached him, saying short things like "that was nice of you" or "you did the right thing." He nodded politely every time, unsure how to respond. Inside, he felt awkward. He hadn't helped the old woman to be noticed. He hadn't expected praise. He had simply seen someone who needed help and stopped. That was all. Yet now, people spoke about him as if he had done something rare. That thought bothered him. He wondered why stopping had become unusual at home. His family noticed the change in him before they noticed the video. He was quieter than usual, more thoughtful. When they finally saw the clip, their reaction was mixed. Pride, yes. But also concern. "You didn't tell us," someone said gently. "There wasn't anything to tell," he replied. They watched it together. The room fell silent as the moment played out on the screen. When it ended, no one spoke right away. "I'm proud of you," one of them said finally. "But I hope people remember you're still just a kid." He nodded. That was exactly how he felt. Across the city, the old woman experienced a tension of a different kind. Neighbors stopped her to ask if she was okay. Some apologized for not helping that day, their words heavy with regret. Others thanked her for reminding them what kindness looked like. She listened patiently. She told them the same thing every time. He didn't do it to teach anyone a lesson. He just helped. The tension tired her, but she understood why it mattered. She had lived long enough to know that people needed reminders sometimes. Not lectures. Just examples. One afternoon, someone asked her if she wanted to meet the boy again. She thought about it carefully. Part of her wanted to thank him properly, without noise or cameras. Another part worried about putting more weight on his shoulders. She remembered his calm face, his steady voice, the way he had stood firm when the cars honked. He already did enough, she said. But if I ever see him again, I'll smile. The story continued to move outward, touching people in ways no one could predict. A teacher used it as an example in class. Not to praise the boy, but to ask a simple question: why do we hesitate? The room fell quiet as students thought about it. Some admitted they were afraid of doing the wrong thing. Others said they assumed someone else would help. The conversation stayed with them. In another place, someone helped an elderly man carry groceries across a street and later said they thought of the video before stopping. Somewhere else, someone chose patience instead of frustration when traffic slowed. None of these moments were recorded. None went viral. But they happened. The boy did not know about most of them. What he did know was that the world felt louder now. Every small action seemed watched, measured. He began to miss the invisibility he once had. Not because he regretted helping, but because he wanted kindness to feel normal again, not exceptional. One evening, as he stood at the same crosswalk, waiting for the light to change, he noticed another older person standing nearby. The memory rose instantly. The choice felt clear. He stopped. This time no one filmed. No one shared. They crossed quietly, exchanged a few words, and went their separate ways. The boy felt relief wash over him. This was how it should be, he thought. The video continued to live its own life, but the boy learned to step outside of it. He focused on school, on home, on the small routines that grounded him. He reminded himself that attention fades, but habits remain. The old woman, too, found herself changed in subtle ways. She no longer rushed past others without looking. She offered small smiles. She spoke up when she needed help. No longer ashamed of asking, one day, weeks later, she stood at that same crosswalk again, this time. Before fear could settle in, someone else stopped. Time passed, and the city slowly forgot the noise around the video. But it did not forget the feeling it left behind. The clips stopped appearing on people's screens as often, replaced by new stories, new distractions. That was how the world worked. Moments rose, shined, and then faded. But what lingered was quieter and deeper. The boy noticed it in small ways at first. It was the looks people gave each other at crosswalks. Less rushing. Less pushing. Sometimes, someone would pause, glance around, and wait instead of charging forward. He noticed drivers who lifted their hands in apology when they had to stop. He noticed people stepping aside for those who walked slower, not everywhere. Not all the time, but enough to matter. He returned to being mostly unnoticed again, and he welcomed it. Life felt lighter without constant attention. He focused on school, on helping at home, on thinking about what he wanted to do with his future. He did not think of himself as someone special. He never had. What stayed with him was not the praise, but the reminder that choices mattered. Even when no one was watching, the old woman's life settled back into its familiar rhythm too. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons passed slowly. Her body still ached. Her legs still tired easily. But something inside her had changed. She felt less alone, not because people suddenly surrounded her, but because she knew kindness still existed in places she hadn't expected. She felt it when someone held a door open, when a stranger asked if she needed help with a step, when a young person smiled at her without rushing past. She began carrying that feeling with her, offering it back when she could. One afternoon, she stood at the same crosswalk again. The street looked the same. The noise was the same. The rush was the same. But she was not. She stood a little straighter. She waited calmly. When the light changed, she took a step forward. Before she could hesitate, someone beside her stopped. It wasn't the boy. It was another stranger, younger than her, older than him. They didn't say much. Just a simple question, spoken without impatience. She nodded, accepted the help, and crossed. No one filmed. No one clapped. The moment passed quietly. She smiled to herself the entire way. The boy never saw that moment, but he lived its echo in his own way. He found himself stopping more often, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. He listened more. He noticed when people struggled and learned to offer help without making it feel heavy. Sometimes, he thought about the day everything changed. He didn't replay it often. He didn't hold on to it like a badge. It was just part of him now, woven into how he saw the world. A reminder that slowing down did not mean falling behind. Years later, he would still remember her face. The fear at first, the relief afterward, the way her hand rested on his arm, light but trusting. He would remember how something so small could grow so large once it left the street. The city kept moving. New buildings rose. Old ones faded. Streets changed. People came and went. But somewhere in that endless movement, a quiet lesson remained. Passed from one person to another without words, that stopping was a choice, that noticing was a choice, that kindness did not need permission, and sometimes All it took to change a story was one person deciding not to walk past. The years did not rush past all at once. They moved the way life usually does, quietly, with small changes piling up until one day they became impossible to ignore. The city grew louder in some places and calmer in others. Streets were repaired, painted over, then repaired again. New shops opened where old ones had closed. Faces changed. Routines shifted. The boy grew older. Not suddenly, not in a way that felt dramatic, but steadily. His shoulders widened. His voice deepened. His thoughts grew heavier with questions about the future. He carried responsibilities now that he hadn't before. School demanded more. Home needed more. The world asked more. Still, a day at the crosswalk stayed with him. It didn't sit in his mind like a memory replaying itself. It lived deeper than that. It shaped how he moved through the world. When he stood in lines, he noticed who was struggling. When he heard impatience in his own voice, he paused. When he felt the urge to rush past someone slower, he remembered what slowing down could mean. He didn't always stop. He was human. He made mistakes. He missed moments, but he noticed. That awareness followed him into every new space he entered. He took on work while studying, simple jobs that paid little but taught him a lot. He met people from all walks of life. Some were kind. Some were sharp-edged from years of disappointment. Some carried quiet pain that only showed when they thought no one was watching. He learned to listen at one job. He watched an older coworker struggle to keep up. Others complained behind their back. He remembered the crosswalk. He stepped in, not by announcing himself, but by adjusting his pace, offering help without drawing attention. The work got done. The tension eased. No one filmed it. That was fine. The old woman continued aging, as all people do. Her steps grew slower, her hands thinner, her world smaller in some ways and deeper in others. She no longer walked that street every day. Some days, she stayed home. Listening to the city through her window, she still thought about the boy sometimes, not in a sad way, in a gentle way, like a story she carried that reminded her the world still had room for care. She told it once in a while, not as a dramatic tale, but as a simple memory. One time she would say, someone stopped. People listened. She noticed how their faces changed when she said it. How simple words could land with quiet weight. She never exaggerated. Never added meaning that wasn't there. She let the truth stand on its own. One afternoon, sitting near the window, she watched people cross the street below. She noticed something that made her smile. A young person stepped back to help someone else. Then another did the same a moment later. The chain continued. She closed her eyes and rested her head back, feeling something settle in her chest that felt like peace. The boy and the woman never met again. Their lives moved in different directions, different years, different rhythms, but they remained connected by that one shared moment that had rippled outward in ways neither of them could fully see. The boy eventually stood at another kind of crossing. It wasn't a street this time. It was a decision about who he wanted to be, about what kind of life felt honest to him, about how he wanted to treat people when no one was watching. He thought back to that younger version of himself, standing at the edge of a busy road, choosing to stop when it would have been easier not to. He realized that choice had been practiced for all the others that came after. Stopping, noticing, helping, they were not single actions. They were habits. The city continued, loud and restless and beautiful in its own imperfect way. People still rushed. Some still walked past. But some stopped. And sometimes, that was enough. The city did not remember faces for long. It remembered noise, movement, and speed. People blended into one another, becoming part of the background as they hurried through their days. Yet every once in a while, a small moment pushed against that forgetfulness and stayed alive in quieter ways. The boy was older now, though he rarely thought about it. Life had taught him how quickly time slipped by when days were full. He carried responsibilities that once seemed far away. Bills, schedules, worries about tomorrow. Still, he tried to hold on to something simple inside himself. He tried not to become too busy to notice, Some days, he succeeded. Other days, he didn't. And when he didn't, he felt it. A small ache of regret that reminded him of who he wanted to be. One evening, after a long day, he stood waiting for public transport. The platform was crowded. People stood close, tired and impatient. A woman nearby struggled with heavy bags. Others shifted away from her, annoyed by the space she took. He noticed he hesitated. He was tired. His feet hurt. His mind was elsewhere. For a brief moment, he understood exactly why people walked past that day years ago. Then he remembered the feeling that followed when he chose not to. He stepped forward. "Let me help you with that," he said. Her face softened with relief. The bags felt heavier than they looked, but he carried them without complaint. They spoke only a little. Simple words. Nothing dramatic. When they reached her stop, she thanked him and smiled. The moment passed, but it stayed with him the rest of the night. He realized something then. Kindness was not about energy or time. It was about attention, about choosing to see when it would be easier not to. Elsewhere in the city, the old woman's life had slowed even more. Her world had become quieter, shaped by familiar rooms and familiar sounds. She no longer walked long distances. She spent more time remembering than planning. She often sat by the window watching the street below. She saw faces she did not know and lives she would never touch. Yet she felt connected to them in a way she hadn't before. She had learned something important late in life. Help did not always come loudly. Sometimes it came softly, from someone who simply decided to stop. One afternoon, she watched a young person help another across the road. No rush, no impatience, just presence. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from recognition. She whispered a quiet thank you, sure to whom. The city continued to teach its lessons in small ways. People helped without recording. Others still walked past. Life remained imperfect and uneven. But moments of care stitched something gentle into the chaos. The boy carried that with him as he moved forward. He never spoke publicly about that first moment. He never tried to explain it. He didn't need to. It explained itself through his actions. Stopping became natural. Noticing became normal. Helping became quiet. And though the city would never slow down entirely, it learned again and again through moments like his that sometimes the most powerful stories were the ones lived quietly. Without an audience, the seasons turned the way they always did, quietly at first and then all at once. Heat softened into cooler days, and cooler days gave way to mornings that carried a bite in the air. The city changed clothes with the weather. Windows closed earlier. Lights stayed on longer. People walked a little faster, shoulders hunched against the cold. The boy noticed these changes more now, not because he had more time, but because he had learned how to look. He had learned that the world offered small signs if someone paid attention. A tired face on a crowded train, a shaking hand holding a cup too tightly, a pause where movement should have been. He noticed pauses. One evening, while walking home, he saw a man standing outside a closed shop staring through the glass. The man didn't ask for help. He didn't call out. He simply stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. People walked past without slowing. The boy almost did too. Almost he stopped and asked a simple question. The man answered with few words, embarrassed at first, then relieved. He had missed his bus. He was cold. He didn't know where to wait. The boy pointed out a nearby place where he could sit, warm, till the next one came. They parted quietly. The boy walked on, feeling that familiar warmth settle in his chest. It was not pride. It was alignment. The feeling of acting the way he believed people should act. Across the city, the old woman's days followed a gentler rhythm. She woke early, not because she needed to, but because her body had learned that habit long ago. She moved slowly, carefully, respecting the limits of her strength instead of fighting them. She spent time remembering. Not everything. Just certain moments that stayed bright, childhood scenes. Laughter from years past, and, often, the crosswalk. Not the fear, but the relief. Not the noise, but the calm voice beside her. She realized something one morning as she sat with a warm drink by the window. That moment had not only changed how others saw the world, it had changed how she saw herself. She was no longer just someone people passed. She was someone worth stopping for. That knowledge stayed with her. On a quiet afternoon, she noticed a young person struggling with a door in her building, arms full, balance unsteady. Without thinking, she reached out, steadying the door. Offering help in return, the young person smiled, surprised. The exchange was brief, almost nothing. Yet it filled the space between them with warmth. Kindness had found its way back to her hands. The boy continued to grow into himself. He made mistakes. He missed opportunities. He sometimes chose comfort over effort. But the awareness remained. It nudged him when he needed it most. He understood now that kindness was not about grand gestures. It was about consistency, about showing up again and again in small ways. He didn't tell this story to many people. He didn't need to. It lived in how he moved, how he spoke, how he paused. The city, unaware of its own lessons, kept teaching them anyway. Through crowded platforms and quiet corners, through missed chances and unexpected stops, and somewhere in that constant motion, the story continued, not as a memory, but as a habit, carried forward by people who chose again and again to notice. Life rarely announces its turning points. Most of the time, change slips in quietly, disguised as routine. The boy learned this as the years continued to shape him. He no longer thought of himself as the teenager from the video. That version of him felt distant now, like a photograph tucked into a drawer and forgotten. Yet the influence of that day never left. It showed up when he chose patience instead of anger, when he listened instead of interrupting, when he noticed someone shrinking under the weight of being unseen. He didn't always act perfectly, but he felt the pull toward awareness, steady and familiar. He worked, studied, and planned his future like everyone else. Some days were hopeful. Others were heavy. There were moments when the world felt unfair, when effort didn't seem to matter, when kindness felt invisible. On those days, he remembered the old woman's face when she reached the other side of the road. That memory reminded him that impact was not always immediate. The city around him kept changing. Technology moved faster. People moved faster. Conversations shortened. Attention scattered. It became easier than ever to walk past one another, both physically and emotionally. Still, small resistances appeared. He saw them on buses, in waiting rooms, at corners where people paused just long enough to notice someone else. These moments didn't make headlines. They didn't spread online, but they mattered. The old woman's world grew quieter still. Her steps shortened. Her days blended together. She spent more time listening than speaking, more time watching than moving. Yet she felt a calm she hadn't known before. She understood something deeply now. Her life, like everyone else's, was made of moments. Some painful, some joyful, some ordinary, and one that had rippled outward in ways she would never fully see. She didn't need to see them. She had felt them on a slow afternoon. She sat with a photo album open on her lap. Pictures of a life lived fully, even when it hadn't felt that way at the time. She paused on a photo of herself, much younger, standing strong and confident. She smiled. She had been that person once, and in a way she still was. The boy, unaware of her thoughts, stood at another crossing somewhere else in the city. This one was quieter, the traffic slower. Still, he noticed someone waiting longer than necessary, hesitating. He didn't rush. He didn't assume. He simply asked. The answer was yes. They crossed together. No cameras, no noise. Just two people sharing a moment of care. As he walked away, he felt something settle again, that familiar sense of alignment. He understood now that the story was never about one video or one day. It was about a way of moving through the world. The city continued, restless and loud. But beneath that surface, something steady remained. A current of small choices made by ordinary people. Choices to stop, to see, to help, and as long as those choices continued, the story was never really over. Time did what it always did. It moved forward without asking permission. Streets changed again. Old signs came down. New ones went up. People who once hurried past each other now walked with different faces, different worries, different hopes. The city kept its rhythm, fast and uneven. But something softer lived beneath it. The boy was no longer a boy. He didn't think about age much. But when he caught his reflection in a window one evening, he paused. There was more weight in his eyes now, more stories behind them. He stood taller, not just in body, but in the way he carried himself. Life had shaped him with both pressure and care. He had learned when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to step forward and when to step aside. He had learned that strength did not always mean pushing through. Sometimes it meant stopping. That lesson stayed with him because it was simple. He walked the city differently now. Not slower, exactly, but more aware. He noticed patterns. He noticed who waited too long at corners, who struggled with doors, who needed just a moment of patience. Some days he helped. Some days he didn't notice until it was too late. And when that happened, he felt it. Not as guilt, but as a reminder. A quiet tap on the shoulder from the person he wanted to be. He had learned not to be hard on himself. Kindness, he understood, was not about perfection. It was about intention, elsewhere. The old woman's world had become very small. Her body no longer allowed her to move the way she once had. The street below her window felt farther away now, even though it hadn't moved. She spent most days in the same chair, wrapped in familiar warmth, listening to familiar sounds, yet her mind traveled freely. She thought often about moments that mattered, not the loud ones, not the ones people applauded, the quiet ones, the kind that changed something inside without making a sound. She remembered the feeling of fear at the edge of the road, the feeling of being invisible, and then the feeling of being seen. That contrast had shaped her final years more than she ever expected. She no longer measured her days by what she could do, but by what she could feel. Gratitude came easily now. So did forgiveness. She forgave the people who walked past, not because they were wrong, but because she understood them. They were busy. They were afraid. They were human. She hoped they had learned something since then. The city had learned. In its own slow way, not all at once. Not everywhere, but enough. The boy stood one evening at a familiar crossing. Not the same one from years ago, but close enough that it stirred something in him. The traffic lights hummed. Cars slowed and surged. People gathered beside him. An older person stood nearby, holding a bag, looking uncertain. He didn't think. He stopped. He asked. They crossed. The exchange was brief, polite, almost forgettable. But as he walked away, he felt that same quiet sense of rightness settle in his chest, the same feeling that had followed him for years. He realized then that the story had come full circle, not because it ended, but because it continued. The old woman did not know that somewhere in the city, the habit she had helped shape was still alive. She did not need to. She had already felt its truth. On one of her last afternoons, she sat by the window as the light faded. She watched people move below, some fast, some slow. She saw someone stop, then another. She smiled softly. Her breathing slowed. Her body rested. Her mind felt calm. She understood now that her life had not been defined by what she lost with age, but by what she passed on without trying. A moment, a pause, a choice. The city would keep moving. People would keep rushing. Some would still walk past, but some would stop. And as long as even one person did, the story would never truly end. The city had a way of moving on, but it also had a way of carrying echoes. They lived in small habits, in quiet pauses, in the way people sometimes slowed without knowing why. Years had passed since the moment at the crosswalk. Yet its trace remained not as a memory most people could point to, but as something felt rather than recalled. The man understood this better now. He had reached a stage in life where days felt fuller but quieter. He worked, returned home, rested, and repeated the cycle. The rush that once filled him had softened. Not disappeared, just changed shape. He had learned that not everything needed to be chased. He still noticed people. He noticed who stood too long at corners, who hesitated before stepping forward, who looked around as if searching for permission to exist in a space already crowded with motion. These details no longer surprised him. They felt familiar, like landmarks in a city he knew well. One morning, as he walked through a busy area, he saw a group of people gathered near a crossing. Not because something dramatic had happened, but because nothing had. An older person stood there, waiting, unsure. Cars rushed past. The light changed once. Then again no one moved. He felt the old pull. But this time, he wasn't the first to respond. Someone else stepped forward. Then another. A small group formed around the person, creating space, offering calm. The crossing became slower, safer. Drivers waited. Life adjusted. He stood back and watched. A smile touched his face, light and unforced. This was what growth looked like. Not being the one who always stopped, but seeing that stopping no longer depended on him, he continued on his way, feeling lighter than he had when he arrived, elsewhere. The old woman's presence lived on in quieter ways. Her room no longer held her breath or her footsteps, but it held her story. Those who remembered her warmth, her patience, and the way she spoke about that day without bitterness. She said someone stopped. One neighbor would tell another. She always smiled when she said it. Her words had outlived her voice. The city changed again. New people arrived who had never seen the video, never heard the story. They brought their own habits, their own pace, and still the pattern repeated. People stopped. Help was offered. Crossings were shared, not because of a rule, not because of praise, but because someone, somewhere, had once shown that it was possible. The man walked home that evening under a sky that glowed softly with fading light. He passed the sounds of everyday life, doors closing, voices rising and falling, footsteps echoing briefly and then disappearing. He felt grounded, present. He understood something clearly now. Stories did not end when they stopped being told. They ended only when they stopped being lived. And this one was still being lived. The world did not pause to mark how much time had passed. It never did. Days blended into years, and years softened into memory. Yet some moments stayed sharp, not because they were dramatic, but because they changed the way people looked at one another. The man carried that, his understanding quietly. He had reached an age where reflection came easily. Not the heavy kind filled with regret, but the gentle kind that allowed space for meaning. He no longer rushed through his mornings. He listened more than he spoke. He had learned that attention was one of the rarest forms of care. He noticed how often people avoided eye contact, how quickly discomfort pushed them forward, how easy it was to pretend not to see, and he noticed when someone didn't. Those moments stood out now. They slowed time, even if only for a second. One afternoon, he sat on a bench near a wide street. Traffic flowed steadily. People crossed in small groups, some confident, some unsure. A person stood alone at the curb, holding a bag tightly, waiting for a gap that never seemed to come. The man watched. He felt no urgency, no pressure. Just awareness. Before he could rise, a young person stepped forward. No hesitation, no announcement, just presence. The two crossed together, side by side, saying little. The man smiled. He realized then that the story had shifted again. It no longer belonged to him, or even to the woman from years ago. It belonged to the space between people, to the choice made in quiet moments. That realization brought peace. Elsewhere, memories of the old woman lived in ordinary places. In the way someone paused at a curb. In the way another offered an arm without being asked. In the way patience replaced hurry. Her life had narrowed in its final years, but her influence had widened. That was the strange balance of things. The quieter she became, the farther her story traveled. No one remembered the exact date anymore. No one remembered the exact words spoken at the crossing. but the feeling remained. The feeling that stopping mattered. The city grew louder, brighter, more crowded. Screens filled with noise, opinions clashed, attention fractured. Yet even there, moments of stillness appeared. Someone waited, someone noticed, someone helped. The man stood one evening at a familiar light, watching the signal change. He felt no rush to cross. He simply stood, present in the moment. When the light shifted, he walked, steady and calm, alongside strangers whose lives briefly aligned with his. For a moment, they were not strangers at all, and that was enough.